why, when, and why it must be immediate.
Educate a woman, you have educated a nation.
The outcome of a review of the same election are being finalized.
When you climb in the pulpit, what you say matters a lot.
Have responsibility to serve the people.
Thank you everyone for joining us here on Insights today. This is Global Television. We're live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. I'm Muyi Agmofegwe. As always, it's a delight to be here with you on the program. Nigeria as a country or as an economy is at a place where it can use every kobo and every naira it can lay its hands on right now. A little wonder the drive towards the $1 trillion economy by the President Bola Tinubu-led government continues to be a very pivotal talking point within the framework of the Renewed Hope agenda. However, in the middle of all this, the element of expatriate quota has even become perhaps a little more topical, given what experts now say is the very crucial role it will play in the mix. I'm joined by Professor Biodu Adeniyi of Base University here in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, to help us find sense in all of this noise. Prof, as always, we're delighted to have you on the program today.
Thank you, my pleasure.
I want us to start this conversation from the news we're now hearing that close to 1.2 billion naira had been realized from issuance of expatriate quota by the Ministry of Interior. They say that surpasses their projected revenue outlook. Is that something to be excited about as a country?
Oh yeah, most definitely, especially where our only source of revenue, oil, is becoming jaded, becoming unpredictable because of the volatility of that sector. You know, and of course, against the background of the crisis we're having in the forex market, it just tells us that if there's any other sector that is productive in terms of revenue accruals from there, it's something that we have to be salutary about. It's something that we have to be celebratory about, you know. But beyond being celebratory, is also to be, you know, it's also the question of the possibility still embedded in that sector. It just tells us that, you know, that's another sector that can still be explored further, and that's why I think, you know, the question of getting expatriate to be much more involved in the revenue generation net, you know, can be very, very instructive. It just tells us again that that sector is very vibrant, very much unlike what people think, that Nigeria is a pariah state, companies are exiting Nigeria. Yes, we know a couple of companies are exiting Nigeria, but before, this can be very worrisome, can be very troubling, but before we begin to start breaking our head on it, perhaps we need to check the number of companies that are operating in Nigeria first, and look at the one that is exiting, the number that are exiting. It can be very troublesome, no doubt. And beyond doing that is also to be mindful of the fact that as we're having companies exiting Nigeria, that kind of one thing or the other, a lot other interests are also coming into Nigeria. At the level of personnel, you know, working in different sectors, in construction, in mining, in steel development, in oil and gas, you know, in trades and services, you know, supermarket businesses. A lot of them are coming in, and I want to believe it is this law that is populating the income net that the Minister of Interior is referring to, which is what has probably led to the rake-up, you know, of income from that sector. Remember that they don't just come in for nothing; they come in paying some levy, and all of the nations across the world, you know, are in this practice of generating so much money from expatriates, you know, because it's your country, and when they're coming in, they have some obligations that they have to meet. And maybe it is in that same light the government is trying to expand, you know, their obligations by getting them to make some more contribution, apart from the personal income tax, apart from the one that the minister has talked about, you know, maybe getting into some other kinds of contribution as it is sustainable in some other countries, which I think has been in the media in the last couple of weeks.
There's a bit of a concern here because this information got out while the Joint Committee of the Senate and House of Reps were playing hosts, so to speak, to the Minister of Interior. Of course, Senator Adams Oshomole, former governor of Edo State, was also part of this conversation. And he did express the fear that this could be an avenue for jobs primarily meant for Nigerians to be quote-unquote stolen from Nigerians.
Yes, I agree with you. And apart from what that Shomole, Adams, comrade that is, also said that because of our hospitality, because we are somewhat neo-colonial, we somewhat tend to ape and idolize anything foreign, because of the increased level of our belief in things external to us, we tend to regard anything that is not original, that is not from us, as slightly more superior than us. That's why our system is somewhat welcoming to these foreign professionals, irrespective of the level of qualification, irrespective of the fact that our own people also might likely have the expertise to replicate what these so-called foreign professionals are doing. And they too are not insensitive. That's why they've taken advantage of it. And in situations we have some of them trooping in their thousands, in their hundreds, doing jobs that the average Nigerian could probably do. And that's how we have technicians, construction workers, low-level jobs being occupied by these expatriates, so-called, in a situation where Nigerian skilled workers can probably do it. And that's why Comrade Oshimele was even saying that some of them are actually prisoners. And the kind of work they probably wouldn't do in their own time, they are being brought to do it here because of our over-reception. And that's why we need to also, commend the imminent initiative around getting them to pay some more level, getting them to make a little more contribution, beyond the statutory ones they are making. Perhaps this will increase the regulatory mechanism, for tolerating or for welcoming or accommodating expatriates in this country. Because in those days, the ordinary arrangement is that expatriates are welcomed, but by the time they are here, the obligation is for them to train locals so that when locals understand their job, then they exit. But in many situations, they come, they train, and they remain forever, and eventually depriving the locals of the opportunity to work, And do not forget, ultimately, we will not be gung-ho about how do we want to get them out. In the manner in which they probably would not get in any other country.
Prof, I'm just curious, who knows, maybe there's that one person watching us right now have this conversation and they're thinking to themselves, is this not hypocritical or some sort of double standard? Because we have so much of local content potential lying dormant in this country. Automobile, for example, readily comes to mind. Look at manufacturing. Yeah. It's either they're having issues with power, they're having issues with access to forex, so we have all of these domestic problems, so to speak. Are we bringing the same energy to solve these problems? Why are we so, if you like, obsessed with this expatriate quota thing?
I'm not sure it's about obsession. I think it's just about, making the best out of the circumstances that we find ourselves, or trying to harness all the pieces in the jigsaw, not leaving anyone out. That's what I imagine that we're trying to do. And that's why we expect every responsible government to do. Yes, we know that automobile companies are there. We also know that steel companies are there. We also know that the mining industry is also there. We also know that many Nigerian experts, Nigerian skilled workers, have been able to manage the banking sector over the years, and they have excelled in those sectors. We know that in agriculture, Nigerians are there and they are doing well. And we also imagine the possibility of Nigerians, if they are determined, right, doing well in the automobile. And the example of the man in Nnewi is there. What's his name now? The automobile company in Nnewi is there. I've forgotten his name now.
You mean Innocent Motors?
Innocent Motors, yeah.
Right.
The example is there, But it's not to say that while we're looking at all these other ones, trying to improve our own productivity and efficiency, trying to make the best out of our own citizenry or citizenship, that we should not look at the other sectors, where opportunities still exist in terms of improving their participation into the contributory net.
Again, there's the concern about whether or not this is just a mere focus on expatriates who are already here. Are we making efforts to create such a system that runs on autopilot in such a way that it naturally invites or welcomes more expatriates into the country, and then Nigeria also benefits ultimately?
Oh yeah, government has been saying over the years of the need to enhance ease of doing business, because there are so many impediments to business operations in this country. Over the years, government, you will aware, they've been talking about it. And maybe some of these ideas around broadening their contributory obligation is also tailored towards that, because if you know that you are obliged to your host country, if you know about your obligations, if they are very straightforward, you can predict them. They are not arbitrary. They are not funded they are not opaque. They are not funded on corruption, on the lack of transparency and accountability. They are legitimate. If you are coming in to work in a particular country, you just know in a very clean way that you have this or that obligation to that country. And by the time you begin to do that, your stay is legitimate. You know that you are free to operate to the optimum. You are likely to be engendered. Your commitment is likely to be enhanced, when you know that the regulatory framework is peak and span. But if it is otherwise, if you are given to cutting corners, you are given to circumventing processes, you are likely to be discouraged, especially where conflict can be problematic in resolution. And that's what I think the government is trying to do. Maybe introducing regulatory mechanisms in areas where they are still lacking. And beyond introduction, really, maybe we should also tell government that it's also important for them to be concerned about implementation, execution, but which is also the bane of our development. We have very fine policies. Sometimes we pay, most of the time really, we pay lip service to their delivery. This one, coming at this very difficult time, this one about expanding the scope of income generation by involving expatriates is no doubt a good one, very innovative, but beyond that, it's also to say that it should not go the way of the former ones in the implementation or the use of the resources that will be generated from there. It should be speak and span, characterized with transparency and accountability for the good of the people. And for now, we can only be hopeful that President Bola Tinubu administration will not depart from that ideal.
Now that you have highlighted the issue of regulation, which is very key, of regulation.
Yes.
All right, it's very important. But then again, we don't seem to see so much of institutional thinking around things like this. So they're always tied around individuals. I'll give you a quick example. Look at NAFDAC. There are people who still believe till this minute that NAFDAC, so to speak, died with late Professor Dora Akunyili. Of course, that's probably a symposium discussion for another day. But for today, going forward, you're wondering how much of regulatory framework do we need to do in light of these expatriates issue?
That's a very fantastic question. And like you said, it's actually a topic for a colloquium. It comes often when we remember the death of our institutions. The fact that most institutions are moribund, they are malfunctioning, or they are not functioning at the optimum. It comes when you remember that the man, the human being, sometimes very powerful ones, are stronger than the institutions. And of course, when the institutions are not working smoothly, it prevents predictability. It erodes confidence, you know. And of course, sustainability is also affected. It is the bane of developing country or underdeveloped countries. And that's why we keep talking about strengthening the institutions. But do not forget, Uyi, that there's a dialectical relationship between the individual and the institution. You need the institution to make you need the man to make the institution strong. You also need the institution to grow the individual, dialectical interconnection, but the role of the individual is stronger, you know, because that individual has to be sacrificial, realizing that he's not working for himself, he's not working for the good of the society through the instrumentality of the institution. You know, but again, we keep hoping that we'll come to a time where our leaders will realize the place of the institution. But while we're still hoping, while we're investing our hope, it's also good to be focusing on details around policies, around programs, around initiatives that will continue to steady the ship of states. You know, and of course, when it's in the area of finance, what we need to do is to be concerned about details that are focused on revenue generation. You know, oftentimes what nations do is to find an equilibrium between income and expenditure. And equilibrium, that point where there's a compromise between your spending and your resources. But in our own situation, we're spending more than we're earning. And what do we do in that circumstance? We need to expand our opportunity to generate more income so that we can go close to our expenditure projections.
It's interesting because Nigerians are probably tired of hearing about monies realized from whatever initiative it is, but they don't seem to see so much of value coming from it. I mean, an example that readily comes to mind is what happened just a few weeks after there had been announcement of suspension of fuel subsidy payments. The federal government had come out to say over 400 billion had been saved. I'm sure every Nigerian, I mean, over 200 million of them are probably wondering what exactly has happened with those monies. So are we just going to sit here and talk about numbers in terms of what will be realized going forward and then Nigerians don't get value for it? There has to be that fusion between what we realize and how much it changes the lives of the Nigerians every day.
I can't agree with you less. I'm concerned, just like you, and like every citizen. And that's why we keep talking about the existence of leakages, wastages, corruption. You know, brigandage, financial brigandage on the part of those who are incumbent. Look, I need you to read, or I will find them, maybe provide for you one book, recent book written by Professor Ademo, where he was talking about corruption, how it has become insidious, endemic, and systemic, and it cannot be dealt with, you know, by papering over the crack through resulting to episodic knee-jerk measures, through arrests, prosecution, you know, maybe sanctioning through one-off imprisonment. That's not the solution to Nigeria's corruption problem, because the problem is actually systemic, really endemic. Hardly looking for somebody who doesn't have the tendency to be corrupt in this country. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. You know, because, I remember what my Lord Bishop Kuka said, that the average Nigerian probably that is not in government is only just waiting for his own opportunity.
So he can take his turn.
To be corrupt. You know, that's the tragedy of our situation. So, and that's how you see some of these monies going away. Sometimes I actually fear when I hear that government is borrowing money. Yes, borrowing, but we're not seeing the result of the monies borrowed. Where are those monies going to? You know, and of course we know where, because you can, if you are very critically minded, you can see the waste every day, you know, in government circles. And you don't need to be an expert to discern what is a waste and what is useful, how monies are probably used and how they are improperly used. It's all very clear. So we need this attitudinal reorientation and to be committed, you know, patriotic about public property, whether liquid or otherwise. We need that level of commitment so that we can again you ensure that resources are well used and the people can begin to see the outcome of numbers that you alluded to.
Just in 2 minutes, Prof, as we wrap it up now, over time, I mean, for several years, we keep hearing very nasty and unfortunate stories about companies here. I mean, they come in as expatriates too. Yeah. They establish here, particularly from Asia and Europe, all right, and how they dehumanize Nigerians. We've heard of cases where they would even lock Nigerians in overnight in the name of doing night shifts.
Sometimes they are sexually harassed.
Exactly, just to mention a few. Yeah. So how do we continue to make sense of this kind of policy while we'll keep upholding the dignity of our people?
Yeah, it's a fundamental question, and it boils down to history, to maybe the economics of nations, and of course, perception of citizenship.
Right.
It also comes down to the lack of belief in the Nigerian system. History, because of the color black, that some people think it's a color that is hardly associated with excellence. And the primitive-minded, the uncivilized, still think, although covertly, you know, that they think that they can reflect this through the maltreatment of, you know, citizens that are not white. And sometimes this is a very painful, difficult thing to say, but it's actually true in some instances. And in some other instances, sometimes you also see some of these people perpetrating this act, trying to undermine us workers, Nigerian workers, because they think they have the economic leverage, you know, the economic superiority, the financial resources, and of course they are just here to help us. So they think that they are doing us a favor by bringing resources here. So that implicates the economics of it. And the other aspect is how we also, the level of faith that we have in ourselves. Sometimes we doubt ourselves. There's something in Latin called the genocyclosis of oppression. And it happens where people who are oppressed grow to start disliking themselves. So when they are disliking themselves, they now want to gravitate towards their oppressor.
That's right.
You know, so that they see the oppressor as the one who is doing something right, and the rest of us are bad.
Prof, I'm afraid this is becoming more interesting by the day, but then again, I understand it's an ongoing conversation, and we continue to track progress in light of this development. Thank you, Professor Biodru Adeni of Bayes University, for coming to share with us.
My pleasure, thank you.
And that's the Insight today. Thank you everyone for watching. I am Uyag Mofwegwe. I'll see you again.
The outcome of our review of the same election are being finalized.
When you climb in the pulpit, what you say matters a lot.
Have responsibility to serve the people. To ask how, why, when, and why it must be immediate.
Educate a woman, you have educated a nation.
The outcome of our review of the same election are being finalized.
When you climb in the pulpit, what you say matters a lot.
Have responsibility to serve the people.